Welcome to Pique Your Interest, your go-to podcast for all things mortgage and real estate. Hosted by Tanner Greenwald and Tim Malaskis. We bring you expert insights to help you buy, sell, and invest with confidence. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the podcast. I am Tim, and Tanner can't make it today. But when we wrote this episode, we really wanted to make sure that, it's Thanksgiving. It's the time of year where you give thanks. And that's kind of what we wanted to do in this episode. You see the two of us and, sometimes guests in these episodes, and there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. It's kind of like making a movie, right? Like there's a lot of people that you see on the screen, but in order to make that happen, there's a ton of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and those people oftentimes don't get enough credit. So Tanner and I wanted to make sure to give special shout outs to the people that have helped make this podcast so successful. In no real particular order. I mean, we're pretty grateful to everyone that's done everything that they've done for us in this podcast. But we want to make sure that we thank our branch manager, Mike. He is, the guy that told us, go and run with it. We ran the idea by him a long time ago, and he's like, yeah, let's do it. So gave us a budget to build this room, to buy the equipment, a couple of pointers along the way. So that's been really helpful. So I definitely want to thank Mike Taylor for that. Really got to thank our marketing department in our corporate office. They really stepped up and they worked their tails off to make this happen. We've got, they created a logo for us. They created all of the marketing collateral. They created the website, the YouTube page, the Spotify page, all of those things. And, without their help, we probably would never have gotten off the ground to do it, because that's the yeoman's work, and that's not really something that Tanner and I excel at. So really appreciate the marketing team for doing that. Also the compliance team at our corporate department. Thanks for keeping us out of jail. Thanks for making sure that the things that we say are compliant, legal, ethical, all of that fun stuff. We certainly appreciate staying out of compliance jail. Also want to thank Jason Hartman. Jason is a videographer who created the intro that you see before every episode, created the outro that you see, lent the music, the visuals. So that's, I think every good podcast has some kind of, very, very regimented, beginning and end. And I think that's something that's really important. And Jason, I think, did a fantastic job with that. Specifically in our marketing department, I want to thank Danielle Fox. Danielle lent her voice to our intro. We were saying, hey, we need somebody to talk about what this podcast is in the intro as the music is playing in the background and the visual is going. And we really needed somebody to lend their voice. We said, Danielle, we think you'd have the perfect voice to do that. Would you be willing to? And she did. And I think it's worked out really well. I think everything, between what Jason did and Danielle did makes our intro really, really nice. Don't know how far I can go with this one, but we have a really good friend of the show, Dom, who really came in and helped us set up, upgrade the equipment, taught us a lot about video editing, even gave our marketing person, a nice little sit down and said, hey, here are some things that we can do to make this a little bit better. He upgraded the mics, upgraded headphones. Dom was a really integral part of this. We did a bunch of episodes before Dom came on board. I think if you watch an early episode and a newer episode, you can kind of see where that difference is. And that difference is pretty much where Dom stepped in and said, hey, this is what I think you could do to take it to the next level. So we're really appreciative of Dom for doing that. Heather Blorstad is our marketing assistant in the office, and she took all of the feedback that Dom gave. She learned how to edit videos, and she's the one that's responsible for the finished product that you see. She puts everything together. She takes out our bloopers. Sometimes it's a lot of bloopers. But she edits the videos. She brings in the visuals, the little pictures that you see in the videos, and it's a time-consuming task. And I'm really happy that she took it on so well and so quickly. That's something that allowed us to not really miss a beat with creating these episodes. And so Heather, does a fantastic job, and I really appreciate that. All of our guests, we've had insurance people and title people and small business owners. And I think that, it's fun for me and Tanner to do this, and there's any number of topics we could talk about, but I think sometimes hearing the voice of somebody else or seeing somebody else talk, or whatever their unique perspective is, I think that's something that's really important. It's something that kind of makes this podcast a little bit unique, a little bit special. It's not just the same people all the time. And so we're truly thankful to all of our guests for jumping in and lending their time, their effort, their energy to making this podcast as successful as it's been. Certainly want to thank our subscribers. We have more subscribers than we thought we would have, which is fantastic. So thank you all. Specifically, I want to shout out Michelle Grimes. Michelle has been all over our videos. She has been commenting and sending us a little encouragement along the way through emails and stuff. So Michelle is, not that everyone is not a great subscriber, because they are, but Michelle certainly stands out among that group of people for being as supportive as she is. So thanks, Michelle, for that. And then finally, I can't do this podcast without Tanner. Nobody's going to sit here and just watch me talk to myself for, 15 or 30 minutes or whatever. So, Tanner's a really important part. She is the one that came up with the idea for the podcast. And, this is really her baby. And, I'm just kind of along for the ride, but it's, I wouldn't be able to do this podcast, and, we wouldn't be able to do this podcast together if it wasn't for Tanner. So I really appreciate her jumping in and doing that. So, it takes a village. It takes a lot of people to make something like this work. And, it's been fun, and we're looking forward to the next year and years, plural. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone who's ever done anything to help make this podcast possible, to make it successful, and to make it fun for doing. So enjoy this time of year, this Thanksgiving time of year. Wanted to make sure we shouted out everyone who has, helped us make this so much fun to do and as successful as it's been. So thank you to everybody. We're going to keep bringing you great content. And if you have any ideas, you want to send them our way, go ahead. We'd love to hear what you have to say, and maybe make an episode out of a topic that you suggest. So thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.